By now, you probably know that if you want to change something about your life, applying small consistent habits to your day is the best shot you have. Both The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg and Atomic Habits by our boy James highlight the power of these consistent efforts. In today's video, we'll find out about the connections and the differences between these two books. Hey, my name's Julian, and on my channel I talk about how to create a better life for yourself, learn new things, and some personal development stories from myself. You're watching the first part of my Atomic Origins series, where I'm taking a look at different sources and inspirations for Atomic Habits. Let's focus on The Power of Habit now, for those who haven't read it. The first part of the book is actually something that already reminded me of Atomic Habits in a huge way. The first thing I want to talk about is the habit loop. According to Charles Duhigg, there are three components. We have the cue, the routine, and the reward. As an example, let's take morning exercise. We have a cue. The cue would be the alarm going off in the morning. We have the routine, which is putting on your sports clothes and going outside, and the reward is to be very energized after you ran. This concept of the habit loop goes through the whole book, and in almost every chapter he has different applications for it. Another key point of the book are the keystone habits, which are very important habits that can lead to having a completely different life. So basically what the keystone habits say is that success doesn't come from getting every single detail of your day right, but focusing on a few single things, a few single habits that then ripple down throughout your day and make your day a good one. One example from the book is a woman that changed her whole life by quitting smoking. So she started quitting smoking, which led to healthier eating habits. She started to jog, started to schedule her days, and everything started with quitting smoking. For example, would be a keystone habit. The third key area of the book, which I want to talk about in my video, is the golden rule of habit change. If you keep the cue and the reward the same, you can change the habit, which is a very interesting point. Of course, this is a lot more complex for a lot of people, but this is the underlying principle. So if you're very familiar with Atomic Habits, then I think that you already see some similarities here. When I started reading The Power of Habit, I actually felt like I was reading like the older brother of Atomic Habits, because it's super similar. We have this book structure, this chapter structure quite a bit, but especially in the self-help world, that you have a certain story and then maybe a second or a third one. And based on these stories, you get these learnings that are then again backed up by science, and you just see it in a lot of books nowadays. James Clear tried to pick up the habit loop where Charles Duhigg kind of left it. And Charles Duhigg has a few sentences about how craving is very important in habit building, but he doesn't talk about it super in detail. So instead of just having the habit loop with the cue, routine, and the reward, he put in the craving between the routine and the reward. So the thing that we're looking forward to have, might it be a dopamine rush or whatever. What I found really funny was that they even used the same sort of brain scan to explain the differences in doing a habit for the first time and then doing it further down the road, showing how the dopamine spike was, for example, at the end or at the beginning, depending on how many times they acted out on the habit already. And that's why the first chapter feels exactly like reading another chapter of Atomic Habits. So the similarities between these books are very striking, but I'm definitely only focusing on the first chapter, maybe the second. Afterwards, they go in a little bit different directions. But it was definitely interesting for me personally to see how little James Clear had to add to have his own book, basically, because he takes a lot from Charles Duhigg and then just wraps it around different stories and some different research, and then he has his own chapter written. It's very bizarre to see how much of Atomic Habits was derived from The Power of Habit. One of the sentences from The Power of Habit really shows how much James Clear was influenced by the book, although that sentence is not even from Duhigg himself, but from a study from 1998, which is: small wins are leveraging tiny advantages into patterns that convince people that bigger achievements are within reach. As you probably know, Atomic Habits is all about getting 1% better every day. And reading that sentence in The Power of Habit, I could almost feel like James Clear reading this and being like, oh my god, I gotta write my own book about this. So those were some of the key connections between these two books. Now, the differences are in turn quite huge if you consider how they are read. Because when we get further into the book, away from the first two chapters, then we really notice how much of a focus is on the stories. And in Atomic Habits, you have these very short stories, and they're very to the point. And James Clear comes around with the point that he wants to make very, very quickly. So we as a reader can use that and implement it into our lives right away. But in The Power of Habit, you have this 3-part structure, and the first few chapters are about the individual, the middle part is about organizations and businesses, and the third part is about societies as a whole and how habits can change them. And when you really like the style of Atomic Habits, which I do, you tend to be overwhelmed by all the stories, because at some point I felt like this was more about the stories and this teeny tiny bit about habits, which left me a little bit disappointed. Although there is definitely good advice also for business owners and everything, me on a personal level, I felt like the second half of the book was not really interesting for me, because it was a lot about stories about societal stuff, which is definitely interesting and good to know, but for my personal purposes, it's just not very interesting. But you should definitely check out the first part of the book if you like Atomic Habits. So to sum it up, I think The Power of Habit is a little bit, or actually way less practical than Atomic Habits. It focuses more on the stories behind the habits instead of the other way around like James Clear does. And it's just also a lot more about organizations and the society as a whole. So if you're still in that stage where you're looking for personal growth, maybe you can read the first third of the book. The second part of the book is not really very giving on a personal level, at least. Okay, so now if you say you get your habits down, but you still feel like you could be more productive or feel better while being productive, then definitely check out my video about Ali Abdaal's book, Feel Good Productivity, and then I say we see each other in the next one. Bye.